lectures at CC, inshallah, with our local community speakers and outside speakers, inshallah. So I'm glad that you all showed up, and hopefully next time we'll advertise it more and we'll bring more people to show up as well. This is a very important topic for Khizzar, and he's very passionate about it, and he knows so much, and he has done so much research, and he keeps on advising us on all these benefits of intermittent fasting, to the extent that it's not easy to eat extra calories in front of him. So, I would say, like in the old ages, they used to scare the kids with Mohammedans. The Mohammedans in Europe, they would say, oh, they'll come and do this and this to you, to just scare the kids. So I would say, if you want to instill good habits, good eating habits in your kids, maybe we can use Khizzar's name. Anyways, I know it's going to be a very serious lecture, so just to refresh you. We have other plans as well. Now that CEC is complete and we have a good, tremendous, cozy structure here, which we can use, and I would encourage everybody, if there are any needs, you can use the structure. We'll be arranging for the kids thing, but let's start with the lecture. Give him a big round of applause, please.
Thank you. So, assalamu alaikum everyone. Hello. Thank you all for coming. So, I'm going to start with the topic. And the topic that I chose today is a new approach to treat and reverse diabetes and the role of intermittent fasting and extended fasting. And people ask me why diabetes and why fasting. I'll take this, I do better with walking. And why diabetes? And because why not? It is truly a 21st century plague. And so before we get into that, a little bit about myself. I am an internal medicine specialist. I'm a hospitalist. I practice here in Florida Hospital, Zephyr Hills. Now it's called Advent Health Zephyr Hills. My area of specialty is adult medicine, but I have a keen interest in diabetes and dietary intervention and preventing and reversing diabetes and other benefits, as well as we will see shortly. I did my training in Boston, Massachusetts, and I've called Florida home now for about 16 years. So this talk would not be complete without acknowledging Dr. Jason Fung. Dr. Fung is a practicing nephrologist. He practices outside of Toronto, Ontario. He's authored several books. He's my hero. I kind of knew about intermittent fasting even before I read his books, but it made it really crystal clear for me. I highly recommend his books, The Diabetes Code, The Obesity Code, The Complete Guide to Fasting. So most of this material is reproduced with permission from Dr. Jason Fung. Some of this is my own work as well, that I've done on the internet and studies and all that. So before we get into this, I wanted to say, a couple of years ago, people who know me would know that I actually was 70 pounds heavier. I was a pre-diabetic. My hemoglobin A1C was 6, which for those of non-physicians, that would put me as a pre-diabetic. And I just could not get up in the morning. I didn't have the energy. It was hard for me to bend over and tie my shoelaces. And I said, I need to do something about it. And that was the motivation for me to, start looking into this. And I came across intermittent fasting, and boy, it has been. I thought there was something wrong with me. I could not lose weight, and there's no such thing. I was just not doing the right thing. So guess what? My A1C was 6, and after about a year of doing this, my hemoglobin A1C is 5.4. So I'm happy to report I'm 70 pounds lighter, and I've reversed my diabetes, pre-diabetes. So it's very, very powerful. And so now, why is diabetes important? So I wanted to talk about the 21st century plague. And, you know, and it's not just a problem in the United States. This is a worldwide problem. If we look at this graph on the left, this actually talks about obesity, the obesity epidemic, right around here, 1977 onwards. And this graph kept going up and up till the 2010s. And after that, it's plateaued, you know. And they are defining obesity as a BMI of greater than 30. And as you can see, 40% of the population is obese. And then on this side, you can see the rising tide of diabetes. So as the obesity epidemic took hold, so did the diabetes epidemic. And there's a lag of about approximately 13 years. So 1980 is when this started, and then 1995, 96 is when the diabetes epidemic. So it's a twin epidemic. And so in the United States, fully 14% of the population is diabetic, and another 38% is pre-diabetic. Now, if you do a quick math, that's 52%. 52% of the country, 1 in 2, half the population is either diabetic or they're pre-diabetic. So look around, look at the person sitting right next to you. You know, there's a good chance that either you're a pre-diabetic or a diabetic. Half of the people in this room, you know, would fall into that category. And most of the people who are pre-diabetic don't even know that they are pre-diabetic. So it is a big, big deal. And if you look at China, China in 1980, the incidence of diabetes was less than 1%. And in a span of one generation, we're talking about 30 years. In 30 years, 11.6% of China, 1.2 billion people, 11%. So, you know, imagine the health problems that they will have. So it's truly a 21st century plague. And so I wanted to talk about, I'm not going to spend too much time on this slide, but the key concept I wanted to mention here is we have known about diabetes since 1500 BC. This is an ancient disease. The word diabetes has been around since 250 BC. So with all of these modern amenities that we have, you know, we have new treatments, new drugs are coming, we have this kind of insulin, Trulicity, this, that. What's going on? We just saw the incidence of diabetes is going higher. So with all of our modern techniques, we're still not able to control this. As a matter of fact, it's getting worse. So most of my talk is going to be about type 2 diabetes, but there are other kinds of diabetes, but we're going to be focusing on this part. So type 1 diabetic is about 5 to 10% of diabetes. And repeat after me, everyone. Where is the insulin level in type 1 diabetes? It's low. Okay? Insulin level is low. Okay? Type 1 diabetes, insulin level is low. And what happens to insulin levels in type 2 diabetes? The insulin levels are high. The vast majority of diabetes is type 2 diabetes, and the insulin levels are high, just that the insulin does not work. So you have insulin resistance, and it's characterized by obesity. Type 1 diabetes, on the other hand, is more of a problem of damage to the pancreas, and the pancreas cannot produce insulin, so the insulin levels are low. So we're going to be talking about type 2 diabetes where the insulin levels are high. Key concept here. So not going to spend too much time on this, but know that A1C is one way of, as I was telling you, I was at 6. So I was here, and now I'm here, 5.4. And there's also blood sugars, fasting blood sugars that you can do to diagnose diabetes. Yes?
So what's the difference between prediabetes and insulin resistance?
And we're going to talk about that. You'll see that. There's a whole section. It's a continuous spectrum, and I have some slides that will go over that. So now I wanted to spend a little time about, this is a whole body effect. You know, the diabetes, you know, it affects the whole body. We have microvascular complications, we have macrovascular complications, and this is the killer here. This is the killer. Heart attacks, strokes, you know, about 4% of the diabetics who smoke, they're going to end up with some sort of an amputation. Bhavik is here, my colleague, you know, on ortho floor. Today I had a patient who's, you know, half of the foot we had to cut because, you know, he's a smoker and he's a diabetic. You know, he came in with that problem. And the risk of stroke, 25% of strokes happen in diabetics. Retinopathy, these are microvascular, so the smaller blood vessels are in certain organs, like the kidney, the eye, or the nerves. So when diabetes affects the smaller microvascular, small vessels, so, and you know, you get big problem. 10,000 cases of diabetes, 10,000 cases of blindness every year happen because of diabetic retinopathy. The blood vessels inside the retina start leaking blood, and you know, the retina gets destroyed and people go blind. 44% of dialysis patients end up on dialysis because they are diabetic. In 2005, it cost the US taxpayer $32 billion because all of them are on Medicare. Before, you know, Dr. Malik is not here, but I was going to tell him that Azhar Malik, he was teasing me. So, diabetic nephropathy. Neuropathy, you know, which if it affects the nerve endings in your heart, people can actually die from sudden cardiac death. You know, if it affects the stomach nerves, you will start having nausea, vomiting. You get diabetic gastroparesis. And so, big problem. Not only that, but, you know, Dr. Afridi is here. Erectile dysfunction is also, you know, urology is his area of expertise, and so we see a lot of patients like that. Dementia is actually called type 3 diabetes, and Alzheimer's dementia is all, so it is a whole body problem, not a single organ that is not affected, with grave consequences for the society. So now, I wanted to talk a little bit about diabetes. You know, I sort of mentioned it in the first slide that we went through, you know, that I showed you two graphs. One graph had to do with the rise in obesity, the other graph showed with the rise in diabetes. So if you combine diabetes and obesity, you get diabetes. Because truly, obesity and diabetes go together. We're talking about type 2 diabetes. And waist, weight matters. So this is a complicated graph, we'll talk about that in a second. Before 1990s, actually, you know, we would tell our patients, you know, if you gain a little weight in your middle ages, it's actually good for you. And then Dr. Walter Willett, he's from Harvard, in 1990 published some data that shows if you gain weight, you're going to, risk of diabetes goes up, and there's a dose response curve. For example, if you gain 30 kilograms, 60 pounds, the risk will be 3,000%. You know, if you gain 10 kilograms or 20 pounds, the risk will be 300-fold of getting diabetes. So there's a dose response curve, and it's not just any weight. This is the subcutaneous belly weight, you know, the bulge that we get. And so this graph shows that. So, Shams, how tall are you? 5'10". 5'10". So how many inches is that? 5 feet is 60 inches, right? And then 10 inches more. So how many inches is that? 70. 70, okay. So what is half of that? 35. 35, okay. So waist to height ratio. So you just told me your height. Divide that by 2. You get your, all of us can do our mental math. Someone who's 5'8", that's 34 inches. 5'6" will be 33 inches. So if your waist to height ratio is 0.5, that's where you want it to be, you know? And it's not the size pants you wear, you gotta take a measuring tape and put it 2 fingers below your umbilicus, and that's where you will measure it. And so if you are 50% or less, you're in good shape. But if you are more than that, you will lose YLL, years of life lost. So if you are a young, so this is 30 years old. If you are a 30-year-old and you are 0.78, you're going to lose 14 years of your life. You're going to die 14 years earlier. And so waist is really, really important. So that's what this graph shows. Waist to height ratio. And why is that important? Because it's a marker of subcutaneous fat is a marker of ectopic intra-organ fat. This tells us how much fat is in the liver, how much fat is in the pancreas, how much fat is in the muscles. So that's what really tells us. So that's a key concept I wanted to mention. So if you go to your physician and you're overweight, and what sort of advice are you going to get? You're going to get what we call eat less, move more. Now, if you guys remember Michelle Obama, when she was in the White House, she had a vegetable garden at the back, and she came up with, this regimen, which was eat less, move more, because all the scientists were telling her how the best way to. So, what does that mean? Eat less, move more. You go on low fat, low fat yogurt, low fat this, low fat that, and you exercise more, which means 30 minutes every day for 5 days. So you eat less fat and you exercise more, and that's how you should lose weight. But guess what? It is nothing but a stunning failure. The failure rate is 99.4%. 99.4% with eat less, move more. And this is the gold standard. This is Women's Health Initiative. It's a Harvard study, 7-year-long study. And these were women who were told, hey, eat less, move more. They just cut back on their calories, This is 1,800 calories dropped to 1,450. So every day they cut their calories by 300, and they exercise more. This is their exercise. They cut back on their fat, low fat, but in return they increase their carbs. What happened to these people? In 7 years, their BMI actually stayed the same, and they put on a little bit of waste. They actually gained weight. So by eating less, moving more, they actually gain weight. And the reason behind that is because it affects your BMR. So who here has seen The Biggest Loser? Raise your hands if you've seen The Biggest Loser, right? So this is actual data from The Biggest Loser, because what is The Biggest Loser? It is eat less, move more. You're going to be in the gym, you're going to be working hard 6 hours a day, and you're not going to eat. And so this is Aaron Egbert, Rudy Pauls, and Danny Cahill. And this was season 8 in 2009. And so they did lose a lot of weight, This is Rudy, and he lost over 200 pounds. But look what happened. He gained most of it back, but then he lost some more. You know what happened here? He had bariatric surgery here. That's what happened. So that's why but all the other people, this guy, not only did they gain it back, but they gained some more on top of it. So eat less, move more does not work. And the reason is this, because their basal metabolic rate drops by about 40%, and the vast majority of our calories are by basal metabolic rate. About 2,000 of our calories are in the. So if you lose 800 calories, it's impossible for you to maintain that. So eat less, move more does not work. Portion control, eating small amounts, or cutting back on your fat does not work.
So we should do the opposite?
We should do the opposite. Exactly. That's why I wanted to show that.
Move less, eat more.
Maybe, but we'll get to that. So I wanted to now talk about what makes us fat. Insulin makes us fat. Insulin, which is a hormone, and it's an energy. Insulin means energy storage. But this is a key concept here. It's a two-step sequential process. Okay, so imagine you go to Costco, you get a ton of grocery, and there's a deal going on, buy one, get one free, and you get nuts and a bunch of things. And then you go and you stuff your fridge, and the fridge is full. And then what do? You go outside in the garage, and you put that in the freezer. So you went to Costco, you put all the groceries in the fridge. You can't put any more in the fridge. That the meat and fish, all of that will go in the. It will go into the freezer. So so that's how insulin works. This is actually your liver, and this is your fat. So when you're eating, first the liver gets full of glycogen, and that's the fridge getting full. This is like your wallet, you put money in your wallet so you can pay your bills, and whatever extra you have, you put it in the bank, and that's the bank. So this is our subcutaneous fat, and this is our temporary energy storage in the liver. The reverse is also true. So when you're trying to burn fat, you have to completely get rid of your fridge. You have to empty the fridge. Once the fridge is empty, then you can go to the freezer. It won't let you go to the freezer unless you've emptied out the fridge. So first you got to burn all your glycogen, which is a temporary energy storage, and then you can go. So that's what this talks about. And I use fancy words like de novo lipogenesis, which basically means fat production in plain English. And so at the same time, insulin blocks gluconeogenesis and lipolysis, which means it will store fat, it will not burn it. So two-step sequential process. So I wanted to talk about, so insulin makes us fat. Insulin helps us store energy. In order to get rid of the stored energy, think of this fat as 60,000 calories of stored energy that we all have in our belly, because each, if you have 30 pounds of fat, that's about 60,000 calories of energy. And insulin is responsible for it. And insulin resistance causes higher levels of insulin, and higher levels of insulin will cause more storage. So this here is a concept, so this is me right now, non-diabetically, I think, and, or Shumps, this is Shumps right here, and his insulin levels are low, fasting insulin levels are low, which means he can bring his blood sugars down with very little insulin. He's not resistant to it. But this here is my good friend in UK, Shahid, and he basically is diabetic and obese, and he needs a lot of insulin to do the same job that Shums can do with such low. So that's how you define insulin. You need a lot more of insulin to do the job. Insulin resistance. And unfortunately, that is key to making you fat and obese. So, so what causes insulin resistance? Insulin lowers your blood sugar and it stores fat. If you have high levels of insulin all the time, your blood sugar is going to keep dropping and dropping and dropping till it's, in the toilet. And what will happen? You're going to die because you will go into a coma. So the body does not want to die. The body doesn't want you to die. So it develops mechanisms to prevent itself from dying. So it will develop a resistance. So if your insulin levels are going to be high, the body will fight it. So in order to reverse it, you have to lower your insulin for a prolonged period of time to get the same results. So, anyways, that was a key concept. So this guy is a subway pusher, and in Japan, subways are very popular, and people cannot get into the subway cars, so they have hired pushers to push them inside. But this guy is insulin. You see, insulin, and this is glucose. So imagine this is a cell, okay? And Mr. Insulin is trying to push glucose into the cell. That's the job. That's what brings your blood sugars down. So when you have so many people, so much glucose in your body, there's no more room. And even though you have two of these pushing people in, you've got hyperinsulinemia, yet your blood glucose level is high because there's just too many people. It's population overgrowth. In other words, you have too much sugar in your body. So if you have too much sugar in your body, no matter what insulin does, your sugar is going to be high. So it spills over. That's how you develop insulin This here is insulin resistance, okay? There's too many people, too much sugar in your body. Okay, and now the next one is, so diabetes is you were asking about insulin resistance. So diabetes is a two-step process. The first step is insulin resistance, insulin levels constantly stay high. And then the second step is pancreatic dysfunction. So when the insulin level stays high, then what happens is, first I told you two-step process. You fill the fridge with glycogen, and whatever is left, then you have to go to the freezer and you start producing fat. So the liver actually starts producing fat. You get fatty liver, and then the rest goes into your pancreas, and when your pancreas is full of fat, then you develop diabetes. So if you look here, I wanted to show you this slide. This is about metabolic syndrome. It's the same spectrum. Hyperinsulinemia, insulin resistance, metabolic syndrome, diabetes. Okay, so we're, in 1980s, I don't know if you have any gastroenterologists here, nobody knew about fatty liver. People used to get fatty liver from drinking alcohol. So when you would go to the doctor in order to avoid embarrassment, they would say, oh, you may have fatty liver. People didn't even know what fatty liver was. Guess what? In less than 30 years, we have 65 million people who have fatty liver. And fatty liver is the #1 cause of liver cirrhosis. It's not alcohol, it's not hepatitis C, it's fat, because we are really obese. When we're obese, when we're eating so much sugar, the liver gets full of fat, and this leads to cancer. So every year, this is the number of liver cancers related to eating too much sugar. Basically, that's what it does. And metabolic syndrome was also called Syndrome X by Dr. Gerald Raven. And it's basically a little bit of this, a little bit of that, a little bit of this. And these are all linked with insulin. So your cholesterol is high, but not high enough to call it a full-blown high cholesterol. Your sugars are high, but they are not high enough to call diabetes. Your blood pressure is high, but not high enough to call it full-blown hypertension. And so it's a precursor to all of these things. And then this sort of puts it in there. So, you have hypertension, you have high blood pressure, you have being overweight, you've got a lot of belly fat, and triglycerides are high, and HDL is low, and then you develop insulin resistance. So these are the things that happen in metabolic syndrome. So I'm going to skip over this slide. This is for my physician friends who are here. Basically, these are the trials. This is what really led us to believe, hypothesize what actually happened. The first trial that you see here, DCCT, we all read about it in med school because this was before our time, in 1980 to 1990. And diabetes complications control trial is basically, this one is for type 1 diabetics, all these others are for type 2 diabetes. What this trial showed, in summary, is when you have high blood sugars, it causes glucotoxicity, which is measured by hemoglobin A1C. And they thought if you lower the glucose level, you will reverse glucotoxicity. And it was shown because we reduced heart attacks by about 40% in type 1 diabetics. Type 1 diabetics, lowering your sugar by giving insulin is a smashing success. They thought maybe this will work for type 2 diabetes, but no. Remember what I said in the beginning. Where is the insulin level in type 1 diabetes? Low, okay? And where is the insulin level in type 2 diabetes? High. So if your insulin is high and you give them more insulin, that does not make sense. You're going to make the problem worse. So, and you see that, they gained weight, and they had low blood sugars, and this was what was seen in the trial. And and this basically proves that point. Type 2 diabetics who were given insulin, they had low levels of insulin. The risk of death is 150. When we gave them high insulins, their risk of death was higher. These are odds ratio, risk of death. It's not, so that's what, yes, it brings the sugar levels down, but, in effect, you're causing them to have other complications. So, I'm going to gloss over this also. This is for my physician colleagues. there are different classes of drugs. What this proves is anything that lowers your insulin level will help you lose weight, and it's going to be good for you. Anything that helps you, that increases your insulin level is going to make you have heart attacks and death. You know, insulin, sulfonylurea, TZDs, we still use them. Rimipride and all of these things, we use them. But they raise insulin. I remember a conversation that I had with Munir. We were driving, and he was telling me about metformin, one of these medications. And I told him, you know, metformin, don't take metformin because it's a band-aid, it doesn't do. So he told me, what is the solution? I told him, you got to fast for 1 week. He said, no, I would rather take metformin. So, but he was just half kidding. But anyways, these are the newer ones, and these lower your insulin, they make you lose weight, and they reduce the risk of heart disease. So we'll skip over those. I also wanted to say, you know, I work with some nurses, and one of my nurse colleagues, I was talking to her and recommended her to go fasting. She was morbidly obese, basically, and she would qualify for surgery, but she insisted on having her surgery. She actually went ahead and had surgery. Surgery cost about $40,000, and then, you know, the complications include you can get, you know, strictures, you can get ulcers, malabsorption, and you can get better results by fasting, you know. So rather than putting yourself under the knife, you can just, you know, fast, basically. And but this trial, you know, there is some rule for this. If you're 500 pounds or 600 pounds, this trial showed that within 3 months they stopped all their meds, they reversed their blood pressure, they reversed their cholesterol, they reversed their diabetes. 95% of them reversed their diabetes. And the benefit was seen way earlier, was seen within a few weeks. Now, we take care of these patients in the hospital. They're on 5 medications after they have surgery. When we send them home on nothing, because we know in 3-4 weeks they will not be. So it does work, but you know, it's a major surgery. It costs a lot of money and has a lot of side effects. So now I'm going to talk a little bit about, so we talked about, you know, what causes that. Insulin causes diabetes, insulin causes insulin resistance. Insulin resistance leads to metabolic syndrome leads to diabetes. So what can we do to reverse diabetes? And so there are 5 golden rules. You know, avoid fructose, and we'll talk about that. Reduce carbs, and enjoy natural fat. Modified keto, you know, keto is a word that people can easily eat. Real food, you know, don't get things from packets. You know, eat an avocado, eat an apple, or, you know, something that God created, and rather than something that man created and put it in a fancy-looking box and put a lot of preservatives. Increase protective factors. That includes vinegar and fiber, and intermittent fasting. And I've saved this for the last. This is the most powerful tool to do that. So, fructose. What is fructose? And I wanted to show, you know, this is glucose molecule, and this is fructose molecule, and it's responsible for the vast majority of the problems, the metabolic problems that we face in our current environment. I mean, you know, before World War II, we would hardly eat 10 grams of fructose, and most of this would come from fruits. And guess what happened? You know, we started eating more and more and more, and we really peaked in the 1990s with soda, you know, Coke, Sprite, and all of those things, fruit juices, you know, all of those things. I've listed them there. And the food industry loves this because, you know, this is very addictive. You know, if you're used to sugar, you know, if someone takes away in Pakistan, Imran Khan government came under a lot of attack, and one reason was because the price of sugar went up. You know, it was, but they didn't know this was actually good for the people. That the sugar became more expensive. As a matter of fact, I wrote to Imran Khan and I told him we should put a tax on sugar and use that money to treat diabetes. Basically, glucose is 6, this is 5. These two combined together is sucrose. This is table sugar. And this This is also high fructose corn syrup. Basically, when these two combine together, and all of these things you can read for yourself. You know, cookies, cakes, desserts, cupcakes, muffins, ice cream, all of these things have this. And it lurks in places that you wouldn't even know. So who here likes barbecue sauce? Raise your hand if you like barbecue sauce. It's full of sugar. Ketchup, it's full of sugar. And they will give it fancy name, maltodextrose, maltodextrin, high fructose corn syrup, cane sugar, concentrated sugar, so many different ways to hide, you know, that this is full of sugar because it's addictive. People can't stop eating it. Fruits also contain fructose, but they have a lot of protective factors. They have fiber in it, and you know, you get vitamins from it, so fruits are good to eat. I still eat fruits, berries, and all of those. That's where my sweet stuff comes from. And stay away from all artificial sweeteners. Remember, it's not the calories that make you fat. What makes us fat? Insulin. Insulin makes us fat. So artificial sweeteners are equal opportunity. They increase your insulin levels. So it's not the calories, it's the insulin. And they may have no calories, but having a sweet thing in your mouth actually increases your insulin levels. So stay away from that.
What about stevia?
Stevia also increases insulin.
No, but it doesn't increase it.
No, there is some data. I actually looked it up. The only one that I saw was erythritol. And we can talk offline. Erythritol, when it causes stomach upset, you know. And so it's better to just stay away from that, you know. And the proof of the pudding is these things have been around for 30 years. What do you think has happened to diabetes? I showed you the slide. You know, it has gone up. We've used them in Diet Coke, has been around for 20 years. And do you think the obesity epidemic, no, it has not. We have Splenda Diet Coke, we have Stevia Diet Coke, you have green Diet Coke and this Diet Coke, they call them, I don't even know, I've not had a drink of Coke in so many years. But I forget the names, but I know they have those things. So now I wanted to show, this is glycemic load. So just look at that. Here, these are, you know, what come naturally, and these are what are processed. So as you can see, the lower the graph, the lower the insulin spike, the lower the increase in your blood sugar. So I don't know if the people in the back can see bananas, brown rice, boiled sweet potatoes. Look at this, peanuts, watermelons, apples. These are all natural food, and they're not going to increase your insulin levels. What does that? Look at this. You know, corn chips, Cheerios, table sugar, corn flakes, rice cereal. You know, Rice Krispies will do it more than. So that's what's going to make you fat, basically. And what is the problem here? The problem is refinement. When you refine it, it loses the protective factors, the fiber, you know, you know, and that's what gives you the spikes in the insulin levels. And natural, like potatoes and these things, they don't have fructose. All these other things have high fructose corn syrup, and that's what will give your insulin kick, and you're going to get fat from that. So stay away from man-made things, you know, eat all natural foods. I'll give you an example. Okinawa. Who here has heard of Okinawa? Okay, and so what is Okinawa? Nagabi's uncle? It's an island south of Japan. And why is it world famous? Because these guys live to be more than 100 years. What do they eat there? They eat potatoes. Potatoes is nothing but carbs. And there's virtually no history of, or no, very low incidence of diabetes, because these are natural carbs, and they're full of protective factors. So, they eat sweet potatoes, yes, absolutely. There is also, in New Guinea, there's the ethnic people, when they eat their food, that's what they eat. And the problem is refining. You know, when you cut it, dice it, slice it, you remove the protective factors. So refined carbohydrates are linked with, so this is what happened in 1960s. Our carbs went up, our fats came down. And then you saw that graph that I showed, the rate of obesity, the rate of diabetes went up because we decrease the fat intake, we increase the carbs. Carbs is the problem. And I wanted to talk about this. This is a Harvard study. It's called Women's Health Initiative. And this was, so you see this graph. This is a key concept here, increasing glycemic load. You're eating more sugar and relative risk of heart disease. The more sugar you eat, this is the least amount of sugar, and this is the most amount of sugar, the more likely you're going to die from a heart attack. The more sugar you eat, chini basically, the more likely you're going to die. Basically, that's what that is. And now the reverse is also true. So remember that graph was eating more sugar. So look at this. This is you're eating more saturated fat. And this study was done in Japan. And as you increase your fat intake, you are reducing your risk of total cardiovascular deaths, heart attacks, and strokes. It's really effective in lowering all of that. So what is saturated fat? That would be eating butter, that would be eating nuts, that would be eating, and those of us who are from the village or who've spent time in the village, desi ghee, And so when I was young, I remember, my auntie who was from the village, she was not educated. We all used to make fun of her because she would bring desi ghee and say, no, this is good for you. And, we had fancy new Rafan, was corn oil that had come and, we said, no, we're not going to eat that, we're going to eat this. And boy, oh boy, how wrong we were. So you have to increase your saturated fat. Saturated fat is protective. It does not increase your cholesterol. It actually, the studies show that it reduces your risk of heart attacks and strokes. And then, I don't know if you can see this, is really small. Daily nut intake will reduce heart attacks by 35%. If you eat cashews or almonds or, and fatty cold water fish. So, Sarah is sitting here, my favorite fish is salmon. Salmon is and it's a complete meal. It has vitamin D, it's full of, and then,
Wild salmon.
wild salmon, that's exactly right. So why wild? Because fish do not produce omega-3. Fish eat omega-3. They eat planktons. Planktons provide, so when you raise them in a farm, you're going to feed them the same junk that we eat, which is corn pellets. So when they eat corn pellets, you're not going to be able to get the benefit of omega-3. Omega-3 you'll get it from wild caught fish. That's exactly right. And then eggs, Sarah loves eggs. She would not give up eggs. It reduces risk of diabetes by 42%. And she's right, she knows this because it makes her feel good, but there's data that shows that. And why is that the case? Because fats do not increase your insulin levels. As a matter of fact, if you eat olive oil or butter, it does not even put a dent in your insulin levels. Everything else will increase it, fat will not increase. Insulin is what kills us. I showed you the graphs. Coconut oil is also great. It's saturated fat. So we only use in our home, avocado oil, coconut oil, olive oil for cooking. Olive oil not as much, that's more for seasoning, but coconut oil, we make eggs and desi ghee, and that's what, is going to help with that. So vegetable oils are not good, because these are artificially made, and there's a concept of omega-3 and omega-6. So you need both omega-3 and omega-6, but they have to be in a balance. So when you eat vegetable oils are produced by industrial grade processing. So they have omega-6 increases inflammation, omega-3 reduces inflammation. So you need to have a balance. So get rid of the vegetable oil, eat the saturated fat, which is, desi ghee, coconut oil, and that's how you will increase your omega-3.
Olive oil is okay?
Olive oil is fantastic. Avocado oil, macadamia oil, all of these are fantastic. Okay, so now I'm going to talk about fasting. So Surah Baqarah in Quran in Ayah 184. I want you guys to look it up. The Ayah talks about how fasting is a must, and if you can't fast, then you have to feed so many people. But at the very end of the verse, it says to fast is best for you if only you knew. So this is ordained upon us, but it's actually it's for our own good. Now, Islam does not have a monopoly on fasting. All major religions have fasting in them. Hinduism has some form of fasting. I have Bhavik and his wife, they're so nice to join. I was talking to them the other day. Hinduism has fasting in it, and they do 7-day fast. Buddhism, they have water-only fast. They have breakfast, and then they drink water for the rest of the day. Christianity has fasting in it. The Lent, the concept of Lent. So this is an ancient practice. We just forgot about it in the last 50, 100 years. So why fasting, and why not eating less amount of food? So this graph shows this. So this is remember the insulin levels we're talking about in diabetics, right? If you go keto, very low carb, you're going to lower your insulin about 50%. This graph is half of this. You're going to bring your insulin level down. But if you fast, that increases the power double. So this is half of this. So you will bring your insulin down by 75%. And if you do both, you're going to be on top of the world. So, and this graph shows continuous calorie restriction. Yes, it works. It brings your insulin level down in 1 month, and then it plateaus. It doesn't go down. But if you do intermittent fasting, you're going to keep lowering your insulin levels. It keeps going down and down. And remember, what causes insulin resistance? Insulin causes insulin resistance. And that causes higher levels of insulin. That causes more obesity. Everything is going in the freezer, If your insulin levels are high, the freezer in the garage is going to be full of food. So we want to lower the insulin levels, reverse the insulin resistance, and that's how you're going to achieve your goal. So that was a key concept here. And starvation. Who here has seen Pulp Fiction? A movie called Pulp Fiction. It's one of my favorite movies, and this guy is, Quentin Tarantino is a great, actually the Oscar that went with was to Quentin Tarantino's movie. And this is all about guns and shooting and all of that. So say starvation mode one more time. I put that in there. So what actually causes starvation? If you eat continuous caloric restriction, if you eat small amounts and eat a little bit and then don't eat, that's what will put you in starvation mode. What does not put you into starvation mode? Actual starvation. If you starve yourself, you're not going to be in starvation mode. So what is starvation mode? Starvation mode is when your basal metabolic rate slows down. So this is actually studies that are done in people who are fasting. Day 1 of fast, day 2 of fast, day 3 and day 4. This graph shows that your basal metabolic rate goes up. There's a calculation of resting energy expenditure, and so it goes up by 12% on day 3, day 4, and you keep losing weight, and your exercise capacity actually goes up. So when you fast, you would think that you're going to be, too sleepy and you're not going to be able to do anything, but actually it is the exact opposite. So think of this. Think of a cave dweller in winter. If you were, sorry, you had a question?
How many hours comes in fast term?
Exactly. I have a slide for that. What would be a good fasting regimen? How to fast? So I have a slide. There's different kinds of fast, and I will go over that in a minute. So why is it like this? When we fast, we become more agile. Imagine every time during the process of evolution, if we were, sitting in a cave and food was scarce, so we would get weaker and weaker, and then someone would come and eat us, So that's why the body is designed like this. If you fast, when you say, when we talk about doctors, this, is a new doctor, he's really hungry for more patients. You say hunger is because, when you're hungry, you're going to be, in fifth gear, trying to, get more business. And so fasting actually stops starvation mode, but if you eat small amounts and eat like this, and Dr. Ansel Keys is a towering figure in nutrition, and in 1950 he did the Minnesota experiment. It's called the starvation experiment. So he took healthy people and men, and he reduced their calories by 40%. So if they were taking 2,800 calories, he gave them 1,600 calories. They did that for about a month. And at the end of that, these guys were feeling cold, their hair started falling, they became, psychotic. They would dream about food, they would, and they were truly in the starvation mode. So if you remember, I showed you the biggest loser. The basal metabolic rate dropped by 40%, and it stayed down for months, for years, So eating small amounts is actually what's going to be detrimental. So, and the mechanism for this is you get hormonal adaptations. Your insulin level drops, your noradrenaline level goes up. That increases your metabolism. And growth hormone actually goes up. And I know we've talked about that, Shari. On day 3, the growth hormone goes up. So you preserve lean tissue. And so, now, I know this slide is a little bit involved, but I wanted to go over this because, so pay attention, I don't want, so this side is, when you eat fat, the fat, so I wanted to talk about cholesterol. Let me ask, where does cholesterol come from? Where does the cholesterol in our body come from? Any guesses?
Sugar.
From what?
Sugar.
That's right. Exactly right. The body is funny. Okay, it will convert one kind of food into another kind. So if you eat sugar, your cholesterol is going to be high. When you eat fat, your cholesterol level is going to go down. Because so when you're eating, fat, that fat, triglyceride, goes through chylomicron, and the chylomicron, this is like the protein lipase. It breaks it down, and then it gets directly deposited into the tissue. So about 15%, 20% of cholesterol you get into your body through this mechanism by eating fat. 80% comes from the liver. Every single cell in our body produces cholesterol. Cholesterol is crucial. The brain is about 3 pounds. 180 pounds a person, the brain is 3 pounds. 80% of the cholesterol in our body is in the brain. Because you need cholesterol for synapses, So when you take statin medications, cholesterol lowering medications, it crosses the blood-brain barrier. And one of the side effects is people who take statins develop dementia. And they develop diabetes, and that's because the brain cannot produce cholesterol. You need cholesterol for normal functioning. So when you eat sugar, remember the fridge, the liver will convert that into glycogen. When the fridge is full, what happens? You produce fat that goes into the freezer. So that's what's happening here. The liver is producing fat, and that fat is this. That's triglycerides attached to VLDL. Okay? So the granddaddy of LDL is sugar, fructose, and glucose. And that LPL breaks it down to, this enzyme breaks it down to halfway point, and then again this enzyme is activated, and then you get LDL. So LDL comes from triglycerides, and triglycerides come from eating sugar. So as you said, sir, that cholesterol comes from eating sugar, not from eating fat, not from eating cholesterol. So in the past we would say don't eat eggs. Egg yolk is full of cholesterol. Don't eat meat because that's old thinking. If you eat sugar, you're gonna eat candy, you're gonna have high cholesterol. And you're going to have high inflammation, as we saw in the graph. So high cholesterol is not a dietary. Go ahead, Shams.
A lot of doctors don't even know this.
That's right.
Just 2 months ago, I took my son to a pediatric, and his cholesterol was higher. So the guy, the first thing he was telling us to stop eggs, this is the same tip of the day.
Right.
Stop eggs, don't eat meat, don't eat any of those things.
Right.
And stop fat and all those things. He never once mentioned anything about sugar.
I would give a disclaimer here. So what he's saying is what the guidelines tell us. So, you know, this is all, you got to go search it for yourself. So when, you know, my hands sort of shake whenever I have to write a type 2 diabetic for insulin, and I do that all the time. You know, I feel bad because I'm giving them something that I know is not going to work for them. But at the same time, you become a bad doctor if you are not following the guidelines, right? So what I do is I recommend this book to them. I want you to go get this book because I'm going to follow what the guidelines say till the guidelines catch up. And they read the book and then they can decide for themselves what they, you know, want to do. So you're right, you know, but he, I think, is following the guideline. If you talk to someone, they're going to put you on a statin and they're going to tell you, don't eat fat, don't eat, go low fat, and low fat this and low fat that. Don't eat red meat, don't eat egg yolks, you know, which is completely upside down, you know, completely upside down. So you see this dot here? Can you guys see this dot? Everyone can see this dot? This is the lipoprotein. So the cholesterol is the cholesterol is the cholesterol. The cholesterol molecule is the same. When it gets attached to the lipoprotein, determines is it good or is it bad. So LDL is a lipoprotein, which is considered the bad cholesterol. HDL is a lipoprotein. So if the same molecule attaches to LDL, it's somehow bad. If the same molecule attaches to HDL, which is another protein, somehow that's good. I mean, there's data, epidemiological data that suggests that. But, you know, as I say, Sarah, correlation is not causation, right? Correlation is not causation, and that's what the studies show. So, you know, who here has heard of Framingham heart study? Most of us have heard about it, right? That's where the cholesterol data, that's where the stuff. They also did a diet study, and they put that in the dustbin because it was not fitting in with the thinking at that time. They thought eating fat, eating cholesterol, it's going to give you high cholesterol, you have clogged arteries and you're going to die from a heart attack. That's not the case. But what this study showed, that dietary fat has no effect on serum cholesterol. None. And eating cholesterol has no impact on your serum cholesterol. That's Dr. Ansel Keys did a study in the 1950s and he showed that through his studies. But you know, since 1977, as you, to your point, Shams, you know, that's what they tell you. Low-fat diet to reduce the risk of heart disease. And this is old science. You know, we've moved on. So that's why this was important. I wanted to show you that. Okay. So next is the benefits of intermittent fasting. Now, we're talking about reversing diabetes. Now we're going in the weeds of intermittent fasting. And so someone asked, so what is fasting? What is the difference between fasting and starvation? Fasting is the voluntary abstinence from food, even though you have food available. We have food here. I've not had anything to eat today, by the way, since morning, and I'm fine. And so that's fasting. I had food available at work. I did not touch it. I had my coffee. I had my water. So that's what voluntary abstinence from eating is fasting. And you can do it for religious reasons, you can do it for spiritual reasons, or you can do it for health reasons. So this study, we were talking about this, Sharif, you know, to lower cholesterol, we take dangerous medications like statins. And the highest dose of statins, you know, will bring your cholesterol level down by 50%. If you take 80 milligrams of Lipitor, which is a drug that we commonly use, it will bring it down by 50%. This is fasting, alternate day fasting. You see here, for 70 days, these people would eat one day and not eat the other day. Eat one day and not eat the other day. 25% reduction in your LDL cholesterol without taking any meds, without the risk of dementia, without the risk of developing diabetes. alternate day fasting lowered your cholesterol by 25%, which is, really good. And even better response for triglycerides. So remember that previous slide that I showed you? The triglycerides, it comes from eating sugar. So if you stop eating, the first thing, so this is the granddaddy of this. So this comes down, right? So, so that's what basically all of this is. And, okay. Now, so fasting, I talked about reversing diabetes, we talked about lowering your cholesterol. How about fasting for a younger, smarter, good-looking you? So you can get that from fasting as well. And so I wanted to focus more, you can increase your brain power by fasting. When you fast, in mice they have found this BDNF, which is brain-derived neurotrophic factor. It gets stimulated, it acts on the neurons, it increases the synapses, and it has been shown to reverse Alzheimer's dementia, and that's BDNF. And same process happens in our brains. When you eat, your insulin levels go up, and that has a converse or inverse relationship to memory. Higher insulin levels, your memory goes down. So when you're fasting, as I said, he's hungry for more patience, he's agile, his thinking clears, and the reason is because we're using fatty acids and we're using ketone bodies, which is a much better fuel for the brain. I also wanted to talk about autophagy. Who here has heard of autophagy? Raise your hands if you've heard of autophagy or autophagy. Not anyone. So autophagy. Auto means yourself, phagy means to eat. Autophagy, you're eating yourself. So basically, which sounds like horrible, but it's actually good for you. You're eating cannibalism, cell cannibalism, and the mTOR pathway. And you're going to hear a lot about mTOR pathway. mTOR pathway is the process with which glucose and amino acids get converted into proteins. And that's what the cells use to produce. So when mTOR is active, you cannot have autophagy. So you have to lower the mTOR and autophagy starts. So I've come from Peshawar, the city of Peshawar, and we had Shobha Bazaar, Salim Uncle, you probably know. So we had a really old car, it was a Corona 1973, and it was about 15 years old by the time, the engine stopped working. So we took it to Shobha Bazaar, and they put a diesel engine in it, and it ran for another 10 years. So, the car got reconditioned, we got another 10 years out of it. And so that's exactly what's happening here. Autophagy is your body's way of cleansing. It goes inside subcellular structures, get eaten up by the cell itself. The cell senses there's not enough energy or calories coming in. So what it does is it starts eating the dead or dying parts inside, converts them into glucose, converts them into proteins, and it uses it for energy. But that only happens if you are fasting for a prolonged period of time. So autophagy, eating yourself, self-cannibalism. And so guess what? That car ran for another 10 years. That same cell was going to be completely renewed from the inside. It will have a new Golgi body, it will have a new nucleolus, it will have a new endoplasmic reticulum, and it's going to work. So we have trillions of cells. This process is going to happen in every single cell. Guess what's going to happen? You're going to have more energy, you're going to be more active, your skin is going to look nice, and the hair is going to look nice, your vision is going to improve. It's going to happen normally throughout your body. So autophagy. Apoptosis. Apoptosis is programmed cell death. And when cells get old, they themselves die. And that's very important because that's how you prevent cancer. Cancer happens when you have abnormal cells, or what we call dysplastic cells. That's our terminology. So when you fast, you get rid of your dysplastic cells because you're remodeling it. You're sending it to the mechanic, and it's putting a diesel engine in the car. So, or anyone who has a BMW would know that they have a certified pre-owned they take it for a 127-point inspection, and change different things in it, and then it comes out, and it works, So autophagy. So the same process, when it happens in the brain, reverses dementia. I was talking to Dr. Zahid. So as you would know, what we think causes dementia is deposition of beta amyloid protein. And they get deposited in the synapses, destroys the connection between the cells. So when you fast, the same cells are going to eat that beta amyloid. When you have, trillions of these beta amyloids, your brain becomes like a sponge. So fasting will get rid of that. And then, you will reverse your dementia. And people are really interested in mTOR and autophagy. Actually, FDA has approved a new drug that inhibits mTOR, and that's going to reverse cancer. So again, we go towards a magic pill. We want to get a drug or a pill or something that will help. Why don't we just fast, and we will just have inhibition of the mTOR. And this is actually recommended, a 7-day annual fast, not to eat anything, which sounds extreme. People may even think you're crazy, but it works because if FDA can come up with drugs, actually I've personally done a 7-day fast. I've done a 10-day fast, and Hasib is sitting here, and that day we were playing cricket, and so I played a game of cricket. After we got done, I did 6 rounds of the ground. Each, that was like 3 miles we ran, and I was ahead of everybody else. And that was on my 7th day of fast. So I was doing fabulous. I was the most active, Hasib, isn't it? I was the most active player on the ground. And it's just natural. So 7-day annual fast. Some oncologists recommend that, when you do an extended fast, chemotherapy works better, and you can reverse cancer as well. So, not to take too long, yes, go ahead, Kashif.
So, when you say 7 days fast, is it like not eating, drinking anything, or is that
No.
just drinking?
Just 0-calorie drinks, and coffee, water, but no calories.
No solid food.
No solid.
Not only food.
No food, no calories. Salt, you can have as much as you want, unless you have high blood pressure.
So that's the question I was going. If you have a high or low blood pressure, how does those factors come into the fasting?
Good question. So remember, metabolic insulin, the syndrome X, the 5 things that it affects. It causes, diabetes, which is high sugars, and hyperinsulinemia, insulin resistance. It increases your cholesterol, increases your blood pressure, and it puts weight in your belly. So when you lower your insulin level, you're going to lower. That's why when people have bariatric surgery, they come off of their blood pressure medication. They come off of their 95% of them come off of their diabetes blood pressure medicine. So if you fast, you lose some weight. If you lose 10, 20 pounds, you will come off of your blood pressure medicines. The same nurse who had bariatric surgery, Karen, she was taking diabetes meds, she was taking blood pressure meds, she's not taking any, and this happened within 3 weeks. And she did a $40,000 surgery, but if she had fasted for 7 days, she would have had the same result. And I told Karen, don't come back with an ulcer, Don't come and talk to me because I did warn you, And so it will, to answer your question, fasting will lower your blood pressure. If you have high blood pressure right now, maybe don't use salt as much. Once you lose 10, 20, 30 pounds, then you can come off of your meds.
What if you have low blood pressure?
It will be fine. This is natural. If you have low blood pressure, it's not going to, you should eat salt then. Put salt in your water if you want to fast. Why do you put salt in your water? So that's a good question. People who fast report headaches sometimes. And the reason why they get headaches is if you're going to eat breakfast with eggs, and it has a lot of salt in it. You're going to have lunch with roti, and there's a lot of salt in it. So when you're fasting, all of a sudden the body, which was used to so much salt, and no longer you have that, you already have that salt, you just don't realize it, because the bread has the salt in it. So all you're doing is replacing that. And you should always use the pink Himalayan salt, which has potassium, magnesium, and phosphate, and it does not have a lot of sodium. I mean, it has sodium, but it has more of these other things. So you get all your minerals through that. Sorry? Himalayan salt, yes. Yeah, it comes from a mine in Pakistan called Khizzar. And, it looks pink. You can get it from any ethnic store.
Sea salt.
Sea salt is also fine, but I think this is better. Because it comes from the mountains, it has these other chemicals in it. Yes?
So, currently I do IF, but so then I should stop doing that and just live it once a year, apparently?
No. Once a year is an additional step if you want to reverse cancer. You should, 7 days is really extreme. You have to practice, get good at it, and then it's like anything. You're like riding a bicycle or, rollerblading or whatever. You got to get good at it. So I think you should fast, continue to fast, and then every now and then, once a year, twice a year, you should do a 7-day fast. If you want, breast cancer, colon cancer, brain cancer, lung cancer, they're all linked with hyperinsulinemia. They're linked with metabolic syndrome. These are all metabolic diseases. So anyways, one other point I wanted to make, I know Sharif, we talked about it. There's a process called Warburg principle. Otto Warburg actually got a Nobel Prize for this. Happened 60 years ago in the 1940s. What he discovered was, I remember what we said, cancer cells are, what are cancer cells? They're abnormal, they are dysplastic. So mitochondria is one part of the cell that's where the energy is, of the cell is utilized. So these cells are damaged. 80% of cancer cells have damaged mitochondria. And they cannot use anything but glucose. They need glucose to grow. And they're rapidly growing cells. They multiply like rabbits. And normal cells don't multiply as fast. So when you fast, you bring your blood sugar levels down, and they come to 60 and they stay there. In a 7-day fast, they will not go down below 60. And when they stay there, then the cancer cells need to grow fast. They need a lot of glucose. You starve the cancer cells because their mitochondria are damaged. They can only use glucose. The rest of the cells can use fatty acids and they can use ketone bodies, but not the cancer cells. So talk about the ultimate chemotherapy, you just starve the cell of any energy. Yes?
Can you again break down your 7 days fast sequence of food, what and what not?
Yeah, so I only drink water and coffee. And I put salt in the water.
Black.
Is it black coffee or with
Black
milk?
coffee,
With
so
milk?
0 calorie. Black coffee without any.
No,
Hello?
You can make a little bit exception for
Lemon.
lemon. Yes, water. Yes, I'm sorry, I forgot. So scanjabin. I don't know who has heard of the word scanjabin. I always put lemon in it, and then I put a little bit of salt. That's how I do my, and that gives a little bit, or lime, or stuff like that. So this basically, I'm going to skip over this, but this is what happens in prolonged fasting, so people often ask me, should I do keto or should I do fast? Which one is better? You remember that slide I showed you, the insulin level drops by 50% with keto, with 75% with fasting. If you combine the both, you're going to have fantastic results. So keto is hard to do. What I do is I actually eat carbs. I eat rice a little bit, and I eat fruit, because they're good for you, and I fast. So that is the best results. Go with low carb, high fat, not exactly keto. So, but don't eat bread, don't eat, these things that give you the glycemic load slide that I showed earlier, low glycemic loads, which can include some carbs in it. So to your question, what is the best fasting regimen? So it really depends on you, what works for you. So this is what most people do. You wake up, you have breakfast, right? Then you have a little break, then you have lunch, and then you have dinner. So this is 12 hours of fed state and 12 hours of non-fed state. It's basically a 12-hour fast. But that really never happens, If you see the ads for Snicker bar, if you see, everyone is putting food in their mouth all the time. And we're programmed like this because that's how the food companies make money, by us eating these things all the time. So, what happens is you get a little more snack here, you get a snack here, and you get a couple of snacks here. And then your body has never had the chance to lower your insulin levels. You always are in a fed state. And so this is high insulin state when you're storing fat. Things are going in the freezer, okay? And this is, things are coming out of the freezer. You have to, you have to increase this duration. So this is what which is society has programmed us like this, There's no reason for us, breakfast is not the most important meal. It's the most important meal to skip. So I I've not had breakfast for the last 3 years. So this would be a 16-hour fast, right? So you have 6, 7 o'clock dinner, and then you don't eat anything till the next day lunch. So like from 6 p.m. one night till 12 noon the following night. So that's 16 hours of fast. All you're doing is skipping breakfast. You woke up, did not have breakfast, have your water, scunchie, and then, you can take it from there. That's the most common I've seen, And this is what I do, I just have dinner, I've not had anything to eat today. So I woke up this morning, I have my big jug made out of metal. I put water, lemon, and pink Himalayan salt. I drink that, sometimes I have 2. And I had my coffee, and did not have breakfast, did not have lunch, and and then I will have my dinner, and then maybe a little bit of a snack after that. So you get 20 hours of low levels of insulin. Insulin resistance goes down. You're getting stuff out of the freezer, out of the stored fat, and so that's what I do. So there's intermittent fasting, and then there's extended fasting. What is the difference? Intermittent fasting is 24 hours or less. Extended fast is longer than 24 hours. And so Dr. Fung, whose picture I showed you in the beginning, is a Canadian. He puts people on, he has this intensive dietary management program. Because you got to find a doctor who's willing to do this for you, Like people who are diabetic, they're on insulin, they're on pills. If you talk to a doctor, he says, you're crazy, I'm firing you, don't come and talk to me again. But you have to find someone who's willing to, or who knows about this. So he has this program, intensive dietary management program, and he puts people on 36-hour fast. All day you don't eat anything, The next day you have lunch or dinner. In that 36 hours, you do that for enough days. And people who are on 200 units of insulin, people who are taking 3 pills, within a matter of a month, they come off of, it's like magic. There's case stories. There's one lady who was so motivated, she decided to do a 7-day fast. She had been on insulin for 20 years. 20 years. So at the end of the 7th day, she did not need insulin. 20 years she had been on insulin, 200 units. 7-day continuous fast, at the end of that, done. She did not need it.
What is alternate day fasting?
So alternate day fasting is one, that would be considered like an extended fast. So it's for 24 hours, you don't eat, and the next day, that will be this 36-hour. The next day you either have lunch, you can even have breakfast if you want, or you can have dinner. But most people, if they can do 24 hours, they feel like, breakfast is not necessary.
I'm just wondering, what time do you eat dinner?
It depends on my work. So,
Not today, I'm just...
it all depends on, if I'm on late call, if I'm coming home at 8,
Because I have that, I'm supposed to eat past sunset, so then...
That's true. If you have acid reflux, you know, it's better to have a 3-hour window before you go to bed. If you have acid reflux. If you don't have acid reflux, then you can eat till late. And so I try to eat 6 or 7 o'clock, and if I'm late, then I will eat 8 o'clock, sometimes I eat at 9 o'clock. Yes, sir?
I know this one guy, he does water fast.
That's right.
10 days water fast.
That's right. That's me.
But still, I see that there's no, he's overweight.
He's still
the obesity.
right.
And he has always an anxiety attacks and all that.
That's not you. No.
Yes.
He's not doing something right.
So what?
He made me drink a Coke.
How do you combat hypoglycemia?
So that's the beauty. It's such a natural thing. You don't get hypoglycemic. You do not get type 2 diabetics unless you have type 1 diabetes. Then yes, you may. But it's because what happens is when you go into fast, you're burning fat. Now, I didn't go into the biochemistry of this. So when you're burning fat, what is fat? Fat is triglycerides, right? So it's three fatty acids combined to a backbone, a carbon backbone, which is called the glycerol backbone, and 3 fatty acids of varying lengths. And they're connected to the glycerol backbone through ketone bodies. So when you start burning fat, you get these 3 fatty acids, you get ketone bodies, and you get the glycerol backbone, right?
So you're running on ketones, not on glucose.
That's right. So your brain can only use either glucose or ketone bodies. It cannot use fatty acids. So 75% but the glycerol backbone gets converted into glucose. It's called gluconeogenesis. And that controls your blood sugar at 60. Get some water. I feel like Marco Rubio. So that glycerol gets converted through gluconeogenesis into glucose. And why that is necessary? Because there are 3 organs in the body that cannot use fatty acids. Brain can use ketone bodies. Adrenal medulla, which is the central part of, there's a gland, produces a lot of hormones, and red cells. They cannot use fatty acids. They have to use glucose, or they can use ketone bodies. And so you do not get hypoglycemia. And people who have fasted for 30 days, have done experiments, the blood sugar keeps coming down. It comes to around 60, and then it plateaus at around 60, and then it stays there. Unless you have some sort of a disease or a problem, then yes, that can be. But you never encounter hypoglycemia.
How often do you do this?
Sorry?
How often do you repeat it?
Fasting? Well, the 7-day, or I fast every day.
Continuously.
I will have dinner at the end of the day.
So, but
The 7-day fast, I probably do maybe twice a year, 3 times a year. Every couple of months, I'll do it. To cleanse the body, basically.
without eating.
Yeah, and as I told you, I was playing cricket with these guys, and I was running circles around them.
Do you think it's like a psychological effect too, like that maybe sometimes it's just that you're fasting and you have this energy?
Yeah.
Like a fall kind of a...
Yeah, and this is, I'm telling you, society has programmed us to have 3 meals a day. Like, whenever people go to it, they go because there's food, We have programmed us. You don't have to eat 3 times a day.
No, what I was saying was that just because you're fasting, do you think this is like a psychological effect on us? Like we think that we have the energy, but we actually don't have the energy?
No, we actually, because fatty acids are a much better source of energy than glucose. That's why you have, and when you use ketone bodies, brain actually does better on ketone bodies. It's a much cleaner source of energy for the brain than glucose. So your mind is sharper. You can think. Actually, there's a story. This is true. In World War II, American prisoners of war were kept in these camps inside Japan, And these Japanese were really, really harsh with them. So they did not feed these prisoners of war. And what happened was, one of these guys actually had a Norwegian guy who was his, so within a matter of 1 week, he learned a completely new language. He started speaking Norwegian within a week because, he was fasting. There's another guy who had read a book and he could read that book from memory because he fasted. They kept him, they starved them during that starvation. So the brain power increases because ketone bodies are a much nicer and cleaner source of energy than glucose. Glucose causes all these other problems, glucotoxicity and all of those other things that we talked about. I'm going to put this slide up there because I think it has some useful information.
I have a question.
Yes.
So if you're a full-blown diabetic and you're taking insulin 3 times, what are the risks involved in that person going on fasting?
A lot of risk. They can die. They can die from hypoglycemia. Hypoglycemia is, you can go into coma. So it can only be done under the supervision of a physician. So what Dr. Fung does is these diabetics come off of it, but there's a process. He cuts their dose by half, or he takes them off of insulin and, puts them on medications. And then if you want to go kamikaze, you can do a 10-day fast and not take it. The first 2 days will be hard, but they have protocols for it. So you have to find someone, a physician, who's willing to, to work with you. And then you have to monitor your blood sugars very carefully. But if you see the insulin, you have to adjust it to the amount of sugar that you're eating. So if you're eating no sugar, then you don't need that much insulin, right? So if you're going to use the same amount of insulin and you're not going to eat, it's going to be a problem. You will go into a coma and you can die from that. So it has to be done under the supervision of a physician who's willing to do that. And he does this remotely. I'm not promoting that, but Dr. Fung has, you can Skype with his team. And he'll tell you, okay, I'll take you in my care and he will reduce, you can reduce this and he will give you advice. And you can do that the first few days, you do it daily or twice a day. And then once you get off of insulin, and you will. Diabetes, imagine this. You can reverse, we saw 50%, right? 1 in 2 people, in this room, 50% of the country is either diabetic or pre-diabetic. Imagine, in 2 or 3 months, you get rid of all these amputations, these heart attacks, the stents. We will go out of business. The doctors will go out of business. There will be no more, strokes, no more. It can happen in within 2 to 3 months if people, follow this fasting protocol. So it's nothing short of a revolution.
Important question, what are we having for dessert?
I don't know, I'm not. Yes, please, go ahead.
You gave a really nice talk. I really enjoyed it. It was very informative. What is your motivation for fasting? And plus, what is your cholesterol profile? What's your blood pressure? And CT and your cup?
So I actually, in the beginning I mentioned, why I'm talking about this is because I myself was a pre-diabetic. My hemoglobin A1C was 6. I had no energy. I could not even bend over to tie my shoelaces. I had so much belly fat. I get short of breath, doing that. And I'm happy to report within 3 months, I lost 50% of, I lost 70 pounds. My A1C was 6. I dropped it down to 5.4 within, 7 or 8 months. And I reversed my pre-diabetes. I had urinary frequency. I would have dry mouth. I had all the signs and symptoms. Diabetes runs in my family. So I was able to reverse all of that. And, that's when I tell my patients, I give them my example. It's really powerful. So, I was working in different hospitals. I go to different hospitals. So there's some nurses who have worked with me, and they had not seen me in like 6 months. When they came in, they said, "Who are you?" I mean, the voice is the same, but you look like a completely different person. So, and then to answer your question about my cholesterol, my triglyceride is around 60. And my LDL is actually less than my HDL. My LDL is 67, My HDL is 75, you know.
Is it all from fasting or exercise?
I think it's from fasting and exercise. I do both. And my total cholesterol is like 160, you know. And so, you know, it's a living proof. And there's data. So this was my motivation for it, because I wanted to do something for my health. Not be on medicines and, you know, feel weak.
मेरा सवाल ये है
जी बताएं.
कि you have been talking about fasting,
Right.
लेकिन मेरा सवाल है कि हफ्ते में 2-3 दिन रोज़ा रखना कैसा रोज़ा I'm not talking about fasting.
Right.
रोज़ा रखना कैसा है और कैसे रखना चाहिए?
Exactly.
नॉर्मली ये होता है कि शरीर को खा लिया अच्छी तरह से दिन भर रोज़ा रहे रोज़े की तरह और शाम को फिर अच्छी तरह खा लिया.
Exactly.
तो इसके लिए कौन सा बेस्ट तरीका मेडिकली
हाँ जी.
रोज़ा रखने का?
देखिए,
3 दिन
आपको मैं बताऊं, मैं ये इस वजह से सूरह बकरा आयत नंबर 184, ठीक है ना. एंड उसमें आप पढ़ लें, उसमें देख लें. उसमें लिखा हुआ है कि आई एम श्योर आपको पता भी होगा. उसमें लिखा हुआ है कि यू नो अगर आप फास्ट करें, यू नो अगर नहीं कर सकते तो मसाकीन को दें, यू नो. एंड ये इसकी मुद्दत कम है. इट्स अ होल पैराग्राफ. एट द वेरी एंड इट सेज टू फास्ट इज बेस्ट फॉर यू इफ ओनली यू न्यू. You know, Rasul Pak ki ye sunat hai ki he would fast every Monday and Thursday, 2 days a week, and then there were 3 days in a month that he would fast. So if you look at it, in the whole month he was fasting like 12, 13 days. And he kind of set that example. So, you know, it feels like it is a burden on you, but it's not. It's actually good for you. You know, that's why it says to fast is best for you if only you knew. If only you knew. And then, as I was telling, this is not just limited to Islam. In all religions, it's there. But to answer your question, if you fast, you know, when I was fasting, I would not do sehri, or I would have a cup of water, and I would have coffee because I would be going to work, you know, after that, so I could focus. But then for iftar, I would, you know, have a nice iftar, but a proper meal. It would be, you know, like. Not, you know, pakoras and this and that, just, you know, have your meal, a proper meal. So that's, if you do that Monday and Thursday, and then you do it 3 times, I think that would be, it will put you on the right track. I know, where is Masood? Did Masood leave already? Masood does this. Masood Khan is my colleague, he works with me. He does this every Monday and Thursday. We go and sit in the cafeteria, he will watch us eat. You know, we'll have our coffee and whatever, but he always fasts, and Mondays and Thursdays, and you know, it's such a good habit. There you go.
I want to make a few comments.
Right.
My voice is not very strong, so I have to speak a little loud. Everybody over here knows me from CC that I have always preached of moderation.
Right.
You have extensive knowledge and it's fantastic. But from experience, I'm going to say a few comments, and that is, number 1, at this stage, I have only had breakfast. Breakfast is my biggest meal of the day.
Right.
I eat very little lunch. I had a little bit of half of donut today. Otherwise, I would have skipped that.
Right.
And right now, I don't know what is hypoglycemia. I know you know, and I know it, but my hands are shaking. So I'm hungry for the dinner.
So I'll tell you why.
Something is like that, okay.
Yeah.
Go
ahead.
Go ahead, but let me say a few things. Secondly, I have seen this diet business going on in many circles. South Beach diet and high protein diet.
That's right.
And high fat diet and other, they all had some of the other side effects.
That's right.
Later on find. And we will probably in 5-10 years down the road, we will find something wrong with this thing too.
Exactly.
And then we will see that there are people who do get hypoglycemia. They do have some problem. Rather than that, they will as you say, with ketones, they might start thinking better, and there will be others who will, probably due to lack of sugar and a lack of ketones, they will probably start having a little bit of not thinking well.
Right. No, I'm a skeptic like you. Definitely, you have to question everything.
Yes,
Right.
and the not just for decades, for centuries, it has been said, eat like a king, breakfast like a king,
That's right.
lunch like a knight, and diet for like a poor man.
Right.
Even in Hindustan, people say it, नवाब राजा की तरह खाओ और शाम का खाना फकीर की तरह खाओ.
Right.
So there is some truth to that. And I think eat small and what was the statement?
Eat less, move more.
Eat less, move more.
Right.
Well, what are we doing with bariatric surgery? We are eating small, and on top of it, we are asking people not to move well either because they are lazy people to start with.
That's right.
Most of the time.
Exactly.
So I think we, and very close to I have never questioned about statins. They're not good, but they are, I would say, gooder than having a high cholesterol.
Absolutely, they are. But if you can do it with fasting without taking pills, that's even better.
If you can do it naturally, that's the best way.
That's right.
But we should not say completely that the statins are bad. If you say that, the guy sitting in the woods, I have a lot of cardiologists with the Lipitor 40, they don't start less than that.
That's
I mean, everybody, Lipitor 40, everybody is having this.
I'm one of them. I'm the stroke patients and heart attack patients. We
I
put
think in moderation,
Right.
it is better if you start from small dose and build it up.
That's right.
I'm speaking from physician point of view.
That's right.
And another my old observation, I have been more preacher of triglyceride lowering than the LDL lowering.
That's exactly right.
Because to me it is like this. I call them as the good guys. They are the one who take care of you, protect you.
That's right.
If you have 50 or plus HDL, you don't have to worry about LDL. Forget
Exactly.
about LDL.
Exactly.
Those people live much longer than the people
Absolutely.
that die.
Actually, triglyceride is an independent marker of heart disease. You know, it is more strongly linked than LDL.
Well, it is now, but
Right.
before that it was considered, don't worry about that.
Exactly.
Triglyceride.
Only focus on
Go with
LDL. That's right.
I think that triglyceride is much more important.
That's right.
Okay, so
To answer your question, Zahir bhai, if you have breakfast, you got your insulin spike. If you get your insulin spike, your blood sugar is going to go down. The key is not to eat it. It's all or none, right? If you even have 50 calories, it breaks that. You will not go into ketosis. So if you want it to be successful,
right now I'm kind of dieting, fasting. That is what happens. If you eat a big breakfast and you eat very light lunch, very light dinner,
Right.
you're going to have fasting intermittent in between.
right. But the duration has to be
Back to the religion.
right.
Eat when you're hungry
Right.
and do not fill it up. Do not fill up the tank.
That's right. Exactly. No, I agree with that. You have to not. I mean, you don't have to stuff yourself. You know, when you're eating. That's what I'm saying. When you break your fast, don't stuff yourself. So some valid points. But what I would say is, it's all or none. If you're going to fast, you have to stick by the recommendation, the rules, which is, don't eat any calories. You have to have, otherwise it fails. If you get your insulin raised, you're gonna crash. And when it crashes, then you're gonna be shaky, you're not gonna, so you have to try it all or none.
Khizzar bhai, then you're doing game and all and not in moderation.
Right.
To me,
Well, our religion ordains it. We have to do it.
It was almost sin to eat dalda banasmati.
Right.
Because it was considered, my God, you have hydrogenated oil.
Right.
And the common understanding was, my gosh, this is such a coconut oil is
Right.
such a saturated fat.
That's right.
You are hydrogenating it, making it even more hydrogenated.
Exactly.
And
See.
we were brought in, oh my God, that's terrible.
Right.
He is terrible. And I always thought, but